The screams from the tilt-a-whirl pierced the October night as Detective Sarah Chun stared at the faded blue denim jacket in the evidence bag, her hands trembling despite 18 years on the force. The carnival lights cast eerie shadows across the excavation site where construction workers had been digging foundations for the new shopping mall, when they found it buried 3 feet beneath what used to be the funhouse, wrapped in plastic that had somehow survived nearly 2 decades. Underground. Marcus Delacroix, she whispered, reading the name still visible on the label sewn inside the collar. The name that had haunted this small town of Millbrook for 18 years. The name that had destroyed families, ended careers, and left a community forever changed. Sarah remembered that night in 2006 like it was yesterday, though she'd been just a rookie patrol officer then. Halloween weekend. The annual Harvest Moon Carnival had rolled into town with its usual fanfare cotton candy vendors, rickety rides, and carnival barkers whose smiles never quite reached their eyes. 16-year-old Marcus Delacroix had gone, with his girlfriend Emma Walsh and best friend Tyler Santos. Only Emma and Tyler came home. Now, at 41, Sarah was the lead detective on a case that had never officially closed, and this jacket was the first real evidence they'd found since that terrible night. As she watched the crime scene technicians carefully catalog every thread, every stain, every microscopic detail, her phone buzzed with a text from her partner, Detective Ray Morrison. The Delacroix family is on their way. So is Emma Walshwell, Emma Harpley now, and Tyler Santos. They all want answers. Sarah closed her eyes, remembering Margaret Delacroix's desperate pleas during those first weeks after Marcus disappeared. The woman had aged a decade in a single month, her auburn hair turning gray, her bright green eyes, so much like her son's, becoming hollow and haunted. David Delacroix had handled it differently, throwing himself into his work as the town's only pediatrician. But Sarah had seen the way his hands shook when he thought no one was looking. The carnival had left town the next morning as scheduled, despite police requests to stay. The owner, a gruff man named Vincent Kozlov, had insisted they'd cooperated fully and had other commitments to honor. By the time additional evidence technicians arrived from the state, the carnival was 3 towns over, and the crime scene, if there ever was one, had been trampled by hundreds of curious townspeople and well-meaning volunteers. 20 minutes later, Sarah found herself in the cramped police station conference room, facing 3 people whose lives had been irrevocably altered by that October night. Margaret Delacroix, now 58, sat ramrod straight in her chair, clutching a worn photograph of Marcus in his varsity football uniform. Her husband David, a year older and considerably grayer, kept checking his watch as if he had somewhere more important to be, though Sarah knew he'd retired 5 years ago. Emma Hartley Nee Walsh was 34 now, married to a successful accountant with 2 children of her own. But Sarah could still see traces of the terrified 16-year-old who'd stumbled into the police station that night. Mascara streaked down her face, babbling about losing Marcus in the funhouse maze. Tyler Santos, also 34, had never married. He worked as a mechanic at his father's garage and lived alone in a small apartment above the shop, apparently unable to move past the guilt of surviving when his best friend didn't. "Tell me again about that night," Sarah said gently, though she'd read the statements countless times. Sometimes details come back years later, things that didn't seem important at the time. Emma twisted her wedding ring nervously. "We arrived around 7:30. Marcus had just gotten his driver's license a few months earlier, and his parents let him borrow the car. We were so excited. It felt so grown up, you know, going out without adult supervision." Tyler stared at his hands. "We did the usual stuff first. Ring toss, basketball shoot. Marcus won Emma, a stuffed elephant at the strongman game. He was always trying to impress her." His voice cracked slightly. "We got funnel cake, rode the Ferris. Wheel. Everything was normal. Everything was perfect. "What time did you go into the funhouse?" Sarah asked. "Around 10:15, Emma replied. "I remember because the carnival was supposed to close at 11, and we wanted to do the haunted house and the funhouse before we left." Marcus was so excited he loved scary stuff. Horror movies, ghost stories, anything that gave you a thrill. Margaret Delacroix made a soft sound, somewhere between a sob and a laugh. He used to hide behind the couch during scary movies when he was little, but by high school, he couldn't get enough of them. He wanted to be a filmmaker someday, make his own horror movies. Sarah made notes, though she knew these details by heart. What happened inside the funhouse? Tyler's leg bounced anxiously under the table. It was one of those mirror mazes, you know, with different rooms and hallways that lead nowhere. There were speakers playing creepy sounds screaming, chains rattling, stuff like that. And carnival workers dressed like monsters would jump out at you. "We stayed together at first," Emma continued, "but the maze was designed to separate people. There were false walls that would slide shut behind you, one-way passages. At one point, I turned around and Marcus wasn't there anymore. I called his name, but the sound effects were so loud. I was in a different section entirely," Tyler said. "I could hear Emma calling for Marcus, but I couldn't find either of them. The mirrors were disorienting. You'd think you saw someone, but it was just your own reflection bouncing around." Sarah leaned forward. "How long were you separated?" "Maybe 10 minutes. Emma looked to Tyler for confirmation. "I finally found one of the exits and waited outside. Tyler came out about 5 minutes later. We thought Marcus was playing a joke on us at first, hiding somewhere, waiting to jump out and scare us. But he never came out." Tyler finished. "We waited until the carnival workers started shutting everything down. Then we went looking for help." Sarah remembered the chaos that followed. The carnival workers had searched the funhouse thoroughly, finding no trace of Marcus. The local police had cordoned off the area and brought in search dogs. But the scent trails were contaminated by hundreds of people who'd walked through the maze that night. By dawn, it was as if Marcus Delacroix had simply vanished into thin air. David Delacroix spoke for the first time since arriving. "We hired private investigators, 3 different ones over the years. They all came to the same conclusion: someone took our son that night, and whoever it was had planned it carefully." "The carnival connection always bothered me," Margaret added. "These people show up, they're in town for 3 days, then they disappear. Perfect cover for someone who wanted to." She couldn't finish the sentence. Sarah's phone buzzed with another text from Ray. "Kozlov's carnival records show they had 12 employees that weekend. I'm tracking down current addresses now. Also, found something interesting about the construction site." "I need to step out for a moment," Sarah told the group. "Please, help yourselves to coffee. I'll be right back." In the hallway, she called. Ray immediately. "What did you find?" "The construction crew discovered more than just the jacket," Ray said grimly. "There's a whole chamber down there, Sarah. Looks like it was deliberately constructed beneath the funhouse platform." The jacket was just the beginning. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "How big is this chamber?" "Big enough to hold a person. Maybe 2. And Sarah, there are scratch marks on the walls. Deep ones, like someone was trying to claw their way out." When Sarah returned to the conference room, she found Margaret Delacroix studying a faded carnival flyer she'd pulled from her purse. "I kept everything from that night," Margaret explained. "Every ticket stub, every photo, every piece of paper. I thought someday it might be important." "Mrs. Delacroix, I need to ask you something that might be difficult," Sarah said carefully. "Did Marcus have any enemies?" "Anyone who might have wanted to hurt him." David's jaw tightened. "We've been over this 1,000 times. Marcus was a good kid. Honor roll student, varsity football, volunteered at the animal shelter. Everyone loved him. Except Emma's voice was barely a whisper. All eyes turned to her. Except what? Sarah prompted. There was this guy at school, Derek Vaughn. He was a senior when we were sophomores. He had a thing for me, but I wasn't interested. When I started dating Marcus, double quotes, Emma looked uncomfortable. Derek made some threats, said Marcus didn't deserve me, that he'd make him pay. Tyler nodded slowly. I remember Derek. He was trouble, always getting suspended, fighting with teachers. His dad was the town drunk, and Derek took it out on everyone else. Derek Vaughn, Sarah repeated, writing the name down. Did he ever follow through on his threats? There were a couple of incidents, Tyler admitted. Derek cornered Marcus after football practice once, said some nasty things. Another time, he slashed the tires on Marcus's bike, but nothing serious enough to really worry about. Where is Derek Vaughn now? Sarah asked. The room fell silent. Finally, David spoke. He's dead. Has been for 15 years. Drunk driving accident about 3 years after Marcus disappeared. Wrapped his car around a tree on Route 9. Sarah felt another piece of the puzzle slipping away. Every lead in this case seemed to dead end eventually. But this new evidence, the underground chamber, changed everything. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment crime. Someone had planned this, prepared for it. Her phone rang. It was Ray again. Sarah, you need to get down here. We found something else in the chamber. And you're not going to believe who just showed up at the construction site. Who? Vincent Kozlov, the carnival owner. Says he drove 300 miles when he heard about the excavation on the news. Claims he wants to cooperate fully with the investigation. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Kozlov hadn't been seen in Millbrook since that October night 18 years ago. His sudden reappearance couldn't be a coincidence. I'll be right there, she told Ray, then turned to the families. I need to ask you all to stay in town for the next few days. We may have more questions as this investigation develops. Margaret grabbed Sarah's arm as she was leaving. Detective Chun, please tell me, is my son still alive? After all these years, could he still be alive? Sarah looked into those green eyes, so much like Marcus's in the photos, and saw 18 years of desperate hope still flickering there. Mrs. Delacroix, I promise you we're going to find out what happened to Marcus. One way or another, you're going to have answers. The drive to the construction site took only 5 minutes, but Sarah's mind raced with possibilities. If Kozlov had returned voluntarily, he was either completely innocent or extremely confident that any evidence against him had been buried with time. But the existence of the underground chamber suggested someone with access to the carnival grounds. Someone who knew the layout well enough to construct a hidden space beneath the FUNHOUS. The construction site looked like an archaeological dig now, with crime scene tape marking off a 30-foot perimeter around the excavation. Floodlights had been brought in, turning the October evening into harsh artificial day. Sarah spotted Vincent Kozlov immediately. He was unmistakable even after 18 years. A massive man with arms covered in faded tattoos and gray hair pulled back in a ponytail. He stood talking to Ray, gesturing animatedly with his hands. Mr. Kozlov, Sarah said as she approached. I'm Detective Chun. I was one of the officers who questioned you the night Marcus Delacroix disappeared. Kozlov's weathered face creased into what might have been a smile. I remember you? Young patrol officer asked a lot of smart questions. I figured you'd be running the show by now. Why are you here, Mr. Kozlov? Because I heard about the jacket on the news, and I knew you'd be thinking what everyone else is thinking, that someone from my carnival took that boy. I'm here to set the record straight. Ray gestured toward the excavation. Mr. Kozlov, claims he's never seen this underground chamber before. Says it wasn't there when they set up in 2006. Sarah studied Kozlov's face, looking for tells. After 18 years in law enforcement, she'd gotten good at reading people. But Kozlov was hard to read. His expression was carefully neutral, and his body language gave nothing away. "Mr. Kozlov, you have to understand how this looks," Sarah said. "A boy disappears from your funhouse, and now we find evidence that someone constructed a hidden chamber beneath the exact spot where your funhouse was located. You can see why we might have questions." "Of course I can see it," Kozlov replied. "But I'm telling you, that chamber wasn't there when we set up our equipment. We would have known the funhouse platform has to be level, and any underground structures would have caused problems." Ray pulled Sarah aside. "I've been thinking about this. What if the chamber was built after the carnival left? What if someone used the carnival as cover for the abduction, but the actual ... containment ... happened here after everyone was gone?" The possibility sent chills through Sarah. It would mean Marcus had been kept alive for some unknown period. After his disappearance, held in a makeshift prison beneath the very spot where he'd vanished. It would also mean his captor was someone local, someone who could access the site after the carnival left town. A crime scene technician approached them, holding a plastic evidence bag. "Detective Chun, we found this in the chamber." It was wedged behind a loose stone in the wall. Sarah took the bag and held it up to the light. Inside was a small spiral notebook, its pages yellowed with age, but still legible. She opened the bag carefully and flipped through a few pages. Her blood ran cold. As she recognized the handwriting, she'd seen it in Marcus's school records just hours earlier. "It's a journal," she said quietly. "Marcus kept a journal while he was down there." The first entry was dated October 28, 2006, the night of his disappearance. Sarah read silently, her heart breaking with each word. "I don't know where I am. I was in the funhouse maze, and then something hit me from behind. When I woke up, I was in this dark place. There's a little bit of light coming from somewhere, enough to see that I'm in some kind of stone room. The walls are rough, like a basement or a cave. I tried to climb out, but it's too high, and the walls are too smooth near the top. I keep calling for help, but no one can hear me. Emma and Tyler must be looking for me. My parents, too. Someone will find me soon." Sarah flipped to the next entry, dated October 29th. "Still here. I found a bottle of water and some crackers in the corner. Whoever put me here left them for me. That scares me more than anything. It means this was planned. Someone wanted to keep me alive. I keep thinking about who could have done this. Derek Vaughn came to mind first, but this seems too elaborate for him. This took planning, preparation. Derek's more of a punch-you-in-the-face kind of guy." The entries continued for weeks. Marcus documented everything: his failed escape attempts, the food that was occasionally lowered down from above, his growing desperation and fear, but also his determination to survive, his plans for when he got out, his messages to his family and friends. As Sarah read, a timeline began to emerge. Marcus had been kept alive for at least 2 months, based on the journal entries. His captor visited regularly, but never spoke, never showed himself. Food and water were lowered down on a rope, along with occasional supplies, fresh clothes, blankets, even books. The final entry was dated December 15th, 2006. "I think I'm getting sick. I've been coughing for days, and I can barely keep food down. It's so cold down here now, and the blankets aren't enough. I keep thinking about Christmas, about whether I'll be home in time. Mom always makes her famous sugar cookies on Christmas Eve. I'd give anything for one of those cookies right now. If something happens to me, if I don't make it out of here, I want everyone to know that I love them. Mom, Dad, I'm sorry I won't get to make those movies I always talked about. Emma, I'm sorry we didn't get to go to prom together. Tyler, you're the best friend anyone could ask for. I wish I knew who did this to me. I wish I knew why. But mostly, I just wish I could go home. The journal ended there. Sarah closed it carefully, her hands shaking. Around her, the crime scene technicians continued their methodical work, but she barely heard them. Marcus Delacroix had survived for nearly 2 months in that underground chamber, documenting his ordeal, never losing hope that someone would find him. Sarah? Ray's voice seemed to come from far away. You okay? She looked up, realizing she'd been staring at the journal for several minutes. He was alive for at least 2 months, Ray. Whoever did this kept him alive for 2 months. Kozlov stepped closer. Detective, can I see that journal? I know you have no reason to trust me, but I've been in this business for 30 years. I know. Everyone who works the carnival circuit. If someone from my world did this, I might recognize something in those pages. Sarah hesitated, then handed him the evidence bag. Kozlov read silently for several minutes, his expression growing darker with each page. This isn't carnival folk, he said finally. This is too organized, too permanent. Carnival people, we're nomads. We don't stick around long enough to build underground prisons. This was someone local, someone who knew the area well enough to construct this chamber without being noticed. But why here? Sarah asked. Why build it right where the funhouse was located? Maybe that was the point, Ray suggested. Maybe our perpetrator wanted the connection to the carnival, wanted us to focus on the transient workers while he hid. In plain sight, a new voice joined the conversation. Or maybe he wanted to be close to where it happened. They turned to see Tyler Santos approaching, his face pale in the harsh floodlights. I'm sorry. I know I should have stayed at the station, but I couldn't stop thinking about something Marcus wrote in that journal. What do you mean? Sarah asked. He mentioned that this seemed too elaborate for Derek Vaughn, but what if Derek wasn't the only one involved? What if he was working with someone else? Ray frowned. You said Derek died 15 years ago. He did. But Derek had friends, people who hung around with him. There was this older guy, maybe in his 20s when we were in high school, Ray Donnelly. He worked construction, odd jobs around town. Derek looked up to him like a big brother. Sarah felt a spark of recognition. Ray Donnelly. I know that name. He bid on several construction projects around town over the years, including, she paused, the pieces clicking into place, including the original construction of this shopping mall. Ray, pull up the contractor records for this site. While Ray worked on his phone, Sarah turned back to Tyler. Tell me more about this Ray Donnelly. He was trouble, but smart trouble, you know. Derek was all muscle and no brains, but Donnelly was the one who planned things. If Derek wanted to get back at someone, Donnelly would figure out how to do it without getting caught. Ray looked up from his phone. Donnelly Construction won the original contract for this shopping mall project back in 2007. The project was delayed for years due to funding issues, but Donnelly had unlimited access to this site for months after the carnival left. The timeline was perfect. Ray Donnelly would have had the knowledge to construct the underground chamber, the access to build it without being noticed, and the motive if he was working with Derek Vaughn. But there was still something missing. If Donnelly built the chamber, for Derek, why keep Marcus alive for 2 months? Sarah wondered aloud. And what happened to both of them in the end? Maybe they had a falling out, Kozlov suggested. Maybe Derek wanted to let the boy go, but Donnelly had other plans. Sarah's phone rang. The caller ID showed the station. Chun here. Detective, this is Officer Martinez. I've been doing background checks on the names you gave me earlier. I found something interesting about Ray Donnelly. What is it? He didn't just die in a car accident like Derek Vaughn. Donnelly was murdered in December 2006, shot twice in the chest and left in his truck in the woods outside town. The case was never solved. Sarah felt another piece of the puzzle click into place. December 2006. That's around the time Marcus stopped writing in his journal. There's more, Martinez continued. I found a connection between Donnelly and another name from your list. Dr. David Delacroix treated Donnelly in the emergency room 3 times between 2004 and 2006. Broken bones, concussion, injuries consistent. With fights or falls. Marcus's father treated Ray Donnelly? Yes, and detective? I think you should know Dr. Delacroix was working the night shift at the hospital on December 15th, 2006, the same date as Marcus's last journal entry. Sarah's mind raced as the implications became clear. David Delacroix, the grieving father, who'd spent 18 years searching for his son, might have found him after all. But instead of calling the police, instead of reuniting his family, he'd taken justice into his own hands. Ray, we need to bring in Dr. Delacroix for questioning. Now. But when they arrived at the Delacroix house 20 minutes later, they found only Margaret sitting in her kitchen with a cup of cold coffee and red-rimmed eyes. He's gone, she said simply. David left about an hour ago. He took his hunting rifle and said he had something to finish. Sarah felt a chill of premonition. Mrs. Delacroix, did your husband ever mention Ray Donnelly to you? Margaret's face went pale. How do you know about Ray Donnelly? Please, just answer the question. David treated him at the hospital several times. David said Ray was trouble, always getting into fights. But David never turned anyone away who needed medical help. Margaret paused, her voice becoming smaller. The last time David treated him was December 2006, a few weeks after Marcus disappeared. Ray came in with a broken wrist and a concussion. David said he'd been in a fight. Mrs. Delacroix, I need you to think carefully. Where would your husband go if he wanted to be alone? Somewhere he felt connected to Marcus? Margaret's hands shook as she set down her coffee cup. The old quarry. David used to take Marcus fishing there when he was little. After Marcus disappeared, David would go there sometimes to think. He said it was the only place he still felt close to his son. Sunset Ridge Quarry was 15 miles outside town, accessible only by a winding dirt road that hadn't been maintained in years. Sarah and Ray drove in tense silence, their police radio crackling with updates from the other units they'd called for backup. The October sun had set completely now, and their headlights cut through the darkness as they navigated the treacherous road. They found David Delacroix's car parked at the edge of the quarry, door open, interior light illuminating the empty driver's seat. Sarah drew her weapon as they approached, though something told her they were too late for any violent confrontation. They found David sitting on a large boulder at the quarry's edge, his hunting rifle lying on the ground beside him. He looked older than his 59 years, his shoulders slumped with the weight of 18 years of secrets. Dr. Delacroix, Sarah called out softly, we need to talk. David didn't turn around. I wondered when someone would figure it out. All these years, I thought the secret would die with me. Tell us what happened, David, Ray said, holstering his weapon. Help us understand. David's voice was barely audible over the wind. I killed Ray Donnelly on December 15th, 2006. Shot him twice in the chest and left him in his truck like the piece of garbage he was. Why? Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew. Because he killed my son. David finally turned to face them, and Sarah saw 18 years of anguish etched into every line of his face. I'd been investigating on my own, following leads the police had given up on. I knew Derek Vaughn was involved somehow, but Derek was too stupid to plan something this elaborate. So I started looking at his associates. David stood slowly, his movements careful and deliberate. Donnelly came to the emergency room that night, with injuries he claimed were from a construction accident. But I could tell they were from a fight. His knuckles were scraped, his wrist was broken in a way consistent with defensive wounds. And he kept checking his watch, like he had somewhere important to be. "So you followed him," Ray said. "I waited until my shift ended, then drove to his house. His truck wasn't there, but I saw lights in the woods behind his property. I parked down the road and went on foot." David's voice broke slightly. "That's when I found the chamber." Sarah felt her heart stop. "You found Marcus? I found his body. He'd been dead for hours, maybe a day. Pneumonia, I think, from the conditions down there. But Donnelly was still there, cleaning up, getting ready to dispose of the evidence." David walked closer to the quarries. Edge and Sarah tensed, ready to grab him if he tried to jump. I confronted him, asked him why, how he could do such a thing to an innocent boy. Do you know what he said? Neither officer answered. He said it was Derek's idea at first, just to scare Marcus, teach him a lesson for stealing Derek's girl. But then Derek got cold feet, wanted to let Marcus go. So Donnelly killed Derek to keep him quiet, then kept Marcus prisoner because he was the only witness. "But why keep Marcus alive for so long?" Sarah asked. "Because Donnelly was sick. He enjoyed it, the power, the control. He told me he'd been planning to keep Marcus indefinitely, see how long he could survive down there." David's voice turned cold. "That's when I shot him." Sarah and Ray exchanged glances. They had enough for an arrest, but something was still bothering Sarah. "Dr. Delacroix, if you found Marcus that night, what did you do with his body?" David was quiet for a long moment. "I couldn't let Margaret see him like that. Couldn't let her know what he'd suffered through. So I buried him properly, the way he deserved. Said the prayers he should have had 18 years ago." "Where?" Sarah pressed gently. David pointed toward a grove of pine trees on the far side of the quarry. "Under the tallest pine tree, the one Marcus used to climb when he was little. I visit him there every year on his birthday." As backup units arrived and processed the scene, Sarah found herself thinking about the terrible irony of it all. David Delacroix had found his son and his son's killer, had delivered justice in his own way, but had carried the burden alone for 18 years. Meanwhile, his wife had spent those same 18 years wondering, hoping, never knowing that her husband had the answer she desperately sought. 3 days later, Sarah stood in the same conference room where she'd first met with the families. But the atmosphere was completely different now. Margaret Delacroix sat beside her husband, holding his hand as he was formally charged with the murder of Ray Donnelly. Despite everything, despite the deception and the years of secrets, she'd chosen to stand by him. Emma Hartley looked older somehow, as if learning the truth about that night had finally allowed her to put away the 16-year-old girl who'd never stopped blaming herself for losing Marcus in the funhouse maze. Tyler Santos seemed different too, lighter, as if a weight he'd carried for 18 years had finally been lifted. The district attorney has agreed to consider the circumstances. In Dr. Delacroix's case, Sarah explained, given the extraordinary nature of the situation and the fact that he was avenging his son's murder, they're open to a plea agreement. David spoke for the first time since his arrest. "I don't want special treatment. I killed a man, and I need to face the consequences. But I need everyone to know I'm not sorry. Ray Donnelly was a monster, and the world is a better place without him." Margaret squeezed her husband's hand. "We're going to get through this together. We should have gotten through all of it together." Sarah had one final piece of business. That morning, a team of crime scene technicians had carefully exhumed Marcus Delacroix's remains from beneath the pine tree at Sunset Ridge Quarry. After 18 years, he was finally coming home. The coroner has confirmed that the remains are Marcus, Sarah said gently. The cause of death was pneumonia, as Dr. Delacroix suspected. There's no evidence that he suffered any violence or abuse during his captivity. Based on his journal entries, it appears he simply succumbed to illness brought on by the harsh conditions. It was small comfort, but Sarah could see the relief in Margaret's eyes. Her son hadn't been tortured or murdered outright. He'd fought to survive, held on to hope until the very end. Emma spoke up for the first time that day. I need to know, was there anything Marcus could have done differently that night? Any way he could have avoided what happened? Sarah shook her head. Based on our investigation, Marcus was specifically targeted. Derek Vaughn and Ray Donnelly had been planning this for weeks, maybe months. They knew Marcus would be at the carnival, knew he would go through the funhouse. There was nothing anyone could have done to prevent it. As the meeting concluded and the families began to file out, Tyler Santos lingered behind. Detective Chun, I have something I need to tell you. Something I should have said 18 years ago. Sarah waited. That night at the carnival, right before we went into the funhouse, I saw Ray Donnelly. He was working with the carnival crew, helping to operate one of the rides. At the time, I didn't think anything of it. Lots of local guys picked up part-time work when the carnival came to town. But now you realize he was positioned to know exactly when Marcus would be in the funhouse. Sarah finished. Tyler nodded miserably. If I'd said something then, if I'd mentioned seeing him to the police, Tyler, you were 16 years old and traumatized. You had no way of knowing that Ray Donnelly was involved in Marcus's disappearance. Please don't spend the next 18 years blaming yourself for something that wasn't your fault. But Sarah knew he probably would anyway. Guilt was a powerful thing, and it had a way of lasting long after the truth finally came to light. 6 months later, Sarah received a letter from Margaret Delacroix. David had been sentenced to 10 years in prison, but would be eligible for parole in 5. Margaret was selling the house in Millbrook and moving closer to the prison so she could visit regularly. She'd also established a scholarship fund in Marcus's name for aspiring filmmakers. The letter included a photo from Marcus's funeral, the real funeral, the one he'd finally received 18 years after his death. The whole town had turned out, including Vincent Kozlov, who'd driven back from wherever his carnival was playing that week. Emma and Tyler had served as pallbearers, carrying their friend to his final rest. But the part of the letter that stuck with Sarah was Margaret's closing paragraph. Detective Chun, I want you to know that I don't hate my husband for what he did. I don't even hate him for keeping it secret all these years. When I think about Marcus alone in that chamber, scared and sick and dying, I'm grateful that David made sure Ray Donnelly could never hurt another child. Sometimes justice doesn't come from a courtroom. Sometimes it comes from a father's love and a father's rage, and that has to be enough. Sarah folded the letter carefully and placed it in the file marked Delacroix, Marcus, closed. It was the thickest file in her cabinet, filled with 18 years of dead ends, false leads, and broken hopes. But finally it was closed. Her office window, she could see the construction site where Marcus's jacket had been found. The shopping mall was nearly complete now, rising from the exact spot where the Harvest Moon Carnival had once pitched its tents. Soon families would shop there, children would play in the food court, and life would go on. But Sarah would always remember the boy who'd vanished beneath those flashing carnival lights, and the father who'd spent 18 years carrying an unbearable secret. Some stories, she reflected, don't have happy endings. But sometimes, knowing the truth is enough. The carnival would return to Millbrook next month. A different carnival with different workers, but the same bright lights and spinning rides that had drawn Marcus Delacroix to his fate so many years ago. Sarah wondered if she'd be able to watch the children laughing and screaming on the rides without thinking of that hidden chamber beneath the funhouse, without imagining a 16-year-old boy writing in his journal by candlelight, never losing hope that someone would find him. Maybe that was the real tragedy of the Marcus Delacroix case. Not just that a young man had died before his life could truly begin, but that his death had robbed so many others of their innocence. Emma would never again enjoy the simple pleasure of a county fair. Tyler would carry survivor's guilt for the rest of his life. Margaret would spend her remaining years visiting her husband in prison. And David would die knowing that his quest for justice had cost him everything he had left to lose. But perhaps there was something to be said for the truth, even when it hurt. Marcus's story was finally complete. His journal entries read, his final resting place known. After 18 years of questions, there were finally answers. As Sarah locked the file cabinet and prepared to go home, she thought about the last entry in Marcus's journal about his wish to know who had done this to him and why. In the end, he'd gotten his answer, even if he hadn't lived to hear it. The phone on her desk rang, startling her from her thoughts. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, but something compelled her to answer. Detective Chun, Millbrook. Police. Detective, this is Father Miguel Santos from St. Catherine's Church. I'm calling about the Delacroix case. Sarah frowned. Father Santos? Are you related to Tyler Santos? He's my nephew. But I'm not calling about Tyler. I'm calling because I think there's something you need to know about Ray Donnelly. Sarah sat back down heavily. Father, the case is closed. Ray Donnelly is dead, and we know he was responsible for Marcus's death. That's just it, Detective. I don't think he was working alone. Sarah's blood ran cold. What do you mean? Ray Donnelly came to confession 3 days before he died. Now, normally, I would never break the seal of confession, but given the circumstances, and the fact that he's been dead for 18 years, I believe God would want the truth to come out. Sarah grabbed a pen and notepad. What did he tell you? He said he'd done terrible things, but that he was just following orders. He kept saying, he made me do it, over and over. When I pressed him about who he was, Donnelly said it was someone everyone trusted, someone who could never be suspected. Did he give you a name? No, but he did say something else. He said this person had been planning something like this for years, that Marcus wasn't the first, and that there were others buried around town. Detective, I think Ray Donnelly was telling me about a serial killer. Sarah felt the room spin around her. Father, are you absolutely certain about what you heard? I've been carrying this burden for 18 years, Detective. I'm certain. After hanging up, Sarah sat in her empty office, staring at the closed file cabinet. Everything they thought they knew about the case had just been turned upside down. If Father Santos was right, then Ray Donnelly had been working for someone else, someone who was still alive, still in Millbrook, someone who had been watching the investigation unfold, perhaps even participating in it. Sarah's mind raced through the possibilities. Who had access to information about the case? Who had been present at key moments? Who would be above suspicion? Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Detective Chun, I saw your car at the station. Working late on the Delacroix case, you should be careful. Some secrets are better left buried. Sarah's hand trembled as she read the message. Someone was watching her, someone who knew she was still investigating. She tried calling the number back, but it went straight to voicemail with a generic automated message. A sound in the hallway made her freeze. Footsteps, slow and deliberate. The night security guard made his rounds every 2 hours, but he'd already passed by 30 minutes ago. Sarah quietly opened her desk drawer and retrieved her service weapon, then moved to the door. The footsteps had stopped directly outside her office. Hello? She called out. Who's there? Silenced. Sarah opened the door slowly, weapon drawn. The hallway was empty, but she could smell something familiar, a cologne or aftershave that she recognized but couldn't place. Her office phone rang again. This time, she let it go to voicemail, but the caller didn't leave a message. Instead, her cell phone immediately began ringing. Detective Chun. Sarah, it's Ray Morrison. I'm at the hospital. Margaret Delacroix was just brought in. Someone attacked her in her home. Sarah's heart sank. Is she alive? Barely. She's in surgery now. Sarah, whoever did this was looking for something. Her house was torn apart. I'm on my way. Asterisk, as Sarah drove to the hospital, her mind raced with connections. Margaret Delacroix, attacked the same night Father Santos revealed that Ray Donnelly had been working for someone else. It couldn't be a coincidence. At the hospital, Sarah found Ray Morrison pacing the surgical waiting room. His face was grim. What do we know? Sarah asked. Neighbor heard screaming around 11 p.m. By the time police arrived, the attacker was gone. Margaret was unconscious, severe head trauma. The house was ransacked, but we don't know what they were looking for. Have you spoken to David Delacroix? Prison? Officials are arranging for him to be transported here if Margaret's condition deteriorates. But Sarah, there's something else. I ran the phone number that texted you earlier. It's registered to a burner phone, purchased with cash 3 days ago. Sarah felt a chill. 3 days ago. That's when we announced we were reopening the Delacroix investigation based on new evidence. There's more. I've been digging into Father Santos's claim about other victims. I found 3 missing persons cases from the past 20 years that fit a similar pattern. All young people, all disappeared during local events where outsiders were present. Ray handed her a file. Jennifer Walsh, age 17, disappeared during the county fair in 1998. She was Emma Walsh's older sister. Sarah's mind reeled. Emma had never mentioned having a sister, but then again, losing a sibling might be something she'd want to forget. Marcus Fleming, age 19, disappeared during a traveling circus in 2001. And Rebecca Torres, age 16, disappeared during a Renaissance festival in 2004. Were any of these cases investigated as connected? No. Different jurisdictions, different time periods. But Sarah, I think I know who our killer is. Before Ray could continue, a doctor in surgical scrubs approached them. Are you the officers handling Mrs. Delacroix's case? Yes, Sarah said. How is she? She's stable, but she's in a medically induced coma. The head trauma was severe. However, she was conscious when the paramedics arrived. She said something they thought you should know. Sarah leaned forward. What did she say? She said, tell Detective Chun that Marcus was right. It's someone everyone trusts. As the doctor walked away, Sarah turned to Ray. You said you know who the killer is. Ray nodded grimly. I've been analyzing the timeline of all 4 disappearances. There's one person who was present at every single event, someone who would have had access to information about the victims, someone who would be above suspicion. Who? Dr. Michael Brennan. He was the county medical examiner for all 4 cases. He would have been at the fair, the circus, and the Renaissance Festival in his official capacity. And Sarah, he was also the doctor who pronounced Ray Donnelly dead. Sarah felt the pieces clicking into place. Brennan could have falsified the autopsy report, made it look like Donnelly died from gunshot wounds when he actually died from something else. Or Brennan could have killed Donnelly himself, then made it look like a revenge killing by Marcus's father. Sarah's phone rang. The caller ID showed the hospital's main number. Detective Chun. Detective, this is Dr. Brennan. I'm calling about Mrs. Delacroix's condition. I wanted to offer my services if you need an independent medical evaluation. Sarah's blood ran cold. Brennan was here, in the hospital, possibly just floors away from where Margaret Delacroix lay unconscious. Dr. Brennan, Where are you calling from? I'm in my office at the hospital. I heard about the attack and wanted to help however I could. Sarah motioned for Ray to call for backup, then kept Brennan on the line. Doctor, we may need to ask you some questions about the Delacroix case. Would you be available to meet with? You? Of course. I want to help in any way I can. Why don't you come up to my office? We can speak privately. Sarah knew it was a trap, but it might be their only chance to catch Brennan before he disappeared. We'll be right up. As they took the elevator to the 5th floor, Sarah checked her weapon and reviewed what they knew. If Brennan was the killer, he'd been operating for over 20 years, using his position as medical examiner to cover his tracks. He would be desperate now, knowing that his secret was about to be exposed. The elevator doors opened to reveal a darkened hallway. Most of the offices were closed for the night, with only emergency lighting providing dim illumination. Dr. Brennan? Sarah called out as they approached his office. The door was slightly ajar, revealing darkness beyond. Sarah pushed it open carefully. Weapon drawn. The office was empty, but Sarah could see that someone had been there recently. Papers were scattered across the desk, and a computer monitor glowed in the darkness. Sarah, Ray whispered, pointing to the computer screen. On the monitor was a document titled Confession of Dr. Michael Brennan. Sarah read the first few lines. I have spent 23 years perfecting the art of taking young lives. It began as curiosity, a desire to understand the moment when life becomes death. But it became something more a compulsion, a need that consumed everything I was. A sound from behind them made both officers spin around. Dr. Brennan stood in the doorway, blocking their exit. He was a tall, thin man in his 60s, with gray hair and kind eyes that now seemed cold and calculating. I was wondering when you'd figure it out, Brennan said calmly. I have to admit, it took longer than I expected. Sarah kept her weapon trained on him. Dr. Brennan, you're under arrest for the murders of Marcus Delacroix, Jennifer Walsh, Marcus Fleming, and Rebecca Torres. Brennan laughed, a sound devoid of humor. Oh, Detective Chun, you've barely scratched the surface. There have been so many more over the years. Young people are so trusting, so easy to manipulate. Why? Sarah demanded. Why did you do this? Because I could. Because I had the perfect position, the perfect cover. Who would suspect the kindly? Medical examiner? I was the one who determined cause of death, who wrote the autopsy reports. I could make evidence disappear, redirect investigations, ensure that no one ever connected the dots. Ray spoke up. What about Ray Donnelly? Did you kill him too? Poor Ray. He stumbled onto my arrangement with Derek Vaughn. Derek was supposed to bring me Marcus Delacroix, but he got cold feet, so I had to improvise. I killed Derek and used Ray to maintain the holding facility. But David Delacroix confessed to killing Ray Donnelly. Brennan smiled coldly. David made it easy for me. When he found Marcus's body, I was already there, cleaning up. I convinced him that Ray was the killer, that justice demanded revenge. David shot Ray, and I made sure the evidence supported a murder charge. 2 birds, 1 stone. Sarah felt sick. You let an innocent man go to prison for a murder you committed. David Delacroix was hardly innocent. He did shoot Ray Donnelly, after all. I just guided the circumstances. And Margaret Delacroix? Why attack her? Margaret was getting too close to the truth. She'd been asking questions, making connections. I couldn't let her expose everything I'd worked so hard to build. Brennan reached into his jacket, and Sarah tensed, but he pulled out a small remote control device. This hospital has been my hunting ground for over 2 decades, he said conversationally. Do you know how easy it is to kill someone in a hospital? A little too much medication, a mistake in the operating room, equipment that mysteriously malfunctions. I've taken more lives within these walls than anywhere else. Sarah heard footsteps in the hallway backup arriving. Brennan heard them too. "It's over, Doctor," she said. "There's nowhere to run." "Oh, but there is," Brennan replied, pressing a button on the remote. "You see, I've spent years preparing for this moment. This entire wing of the hospital is rigged with explosives. When I press this button, we'll all go together." "You're bluffing." "Am I? I've had access to this building for 23 years. I know every pipe, every wire, every structural weakness. It would be so easy to make it look like a gas leak, a tragic accident." Ray stepped forward. "Dr. Brennan, think about what you're doing. There are innocent people in this hospital. Patients, nurses, doctors who've done nothing wrong. Innocent people die every day, Detective Morrison. I've just been more selective about which ones." Sarah could hear the backup officers moving through the hallway, getting closer. She needed to keep Brennan talking, prevent him from using whatever device he was holding. "Tell me about the others," she said. "The victims we don't know about." Yet, Brennan's eyes lit up with a disturbing enthusiasm. "Oh, there have been so many. College students during spring break, young hitchhikers passing through town, runaways who wouldn't be missed. I have a detailed record of every single one. Where are they buried? Some are in the old cemetery, in graves that officially belong to other people. Some are in the woods behind the hospital. A few are in the foundation of buildings around town. I've been very thorough in my disposal methods." Sarah felt a wave of nausea. How many families had spent years wondering what happened to their missing loved ones, never knowing that their children had been murdered by the very man who was supposed to help find them? "Dr. Brennan," she said quietly, "it's over. The police know the truth. Even if you kill us, even if you destroy this building, the evidence will remain. Your confession is on that computer. Father Santos knows what Ray Donnelly told him. You can't cover this up anymore." Asterisk for the first time. Uncertainty flickered across Brennan's face. "Father Santos? What does he know?" "He knows that Ray Donnelly was working for someone else. He knows that you were the one giving the orders." Brennan's hand tightened on the remote. That foolish priest should have minded his own business. Like Margaret Delacroix should have minded hers? Like Marcus Delacroix should have minded his? "Marcus was special," Brennan said, his voice taking on a dreamy quality. "So young, so full of life. I kept him alive for 2 months, you know. Not because I wanted to extend his suffering, but because I wanted to study him, to understand what makes someone fight so hard to live." Sarah heard the backup officers taking positions in the hallway. She needed to end this before Brennan decided to use his remote. "Dr. Brennan, you're a doctor. You took an oath to do no harm. Somewhere inside you, there must be a part that remembers what it felt like to save lives instead of taking them." Brennan laughed bitterly. "Do you know what it's like to spend your entire career dealing with death? To see the worst things that humans can do to each other? After a while, you stop seeing the victims as people. They become specimens, subjects for study. But they weren't specimens. They were children with families who loved them, with dreams and futures. Dreams are just chemical reactions in the brain, Detective. Futures are just statistical probabilities. When you reduce human existence to its basic components, you realize how meaningless it all is." Sarah saw movement in the hallway tactical. Officers getting into position. She made a decision. "Dr. Brennan, if you're going to kill us, at least tell us where the other victims are buried. Give their families some closure." Brennan seemed to consider this. "You want to know where they are? They're everywhere, Detective Chun. This entire town is built on their bones." He raised the remote, his finger hovering over the button. "Tell. Detective, are you afraid to die?" "Yes," Sarah said honestly. "But I'm more afraid of letting you continue to hurt innocent people." Brennan smiled, and for a moment, Sarah saw the man he must have been before the killing started, a doctor who had dedicated his life to helping others, before something dark and twisted had taken over. "Goodbye, Detective John." He pressed the button. Nothing happened. Brennan pressed it again, confusion replacing confidence on his face. "Looking for this?" Ray Morrison held up a small electronic device. "We found your explosive charges 3 hours ago, Doc. Amazing what you can accomplish when you have a bomb squad and a search warrant." Brennan's face went pale. "That's impossible. You couldn't have known. We've been watching you since this morning," Sarah said. "Ever since Father Santos called us. We knew you'd make a move. We just needed to let you reveal the full extent of your crimes." Tactical officers flooded into the room, surrounding Brennan. He offered no resistance as they cuffed him, seeming to deflate like a punctured balloon. As they led him away, Brennan looked back at Sarah. "You think you've won, but you haven't. There are others like me out there, Detective. People who understand that life and death are just opposite sides of the same coin. This isn't over." Sarah watched as the man who had terrorized her town for over 2 decades was finally taken into custody. But his words echoed in her mind. How many other Dr. Brennans were out there, hiding behind positions of trust and authority? The investigation that followed would take months. Brennan's detailed records led to the discovery of 37 victims over 23 years. Some were buried in the locations he'd described. Others had been cremated, and their ashes scattered in the hospital's memorial garden. David Delacroix was released from prison after serving only 6 months. The governor commuted his sentence when the full extent of Dr. Brennan's crimes became known. Margaret Delacroix made a full recovery and was there to greet her husband when he walked out of the correctional facility. Amma Hartley finally learned what had happened to her sister Jennifer and was able to give her family the closure they'd sought for over 20 years. Tyler Santos started a support group for families of Brennan's victims, finding purpose in helping others heal from trauma. But perhaps the most important discovery came from Marcus Delacroix's journal. Hidden in the back pages were sketches, detailed drawings of Dr. Brennan's face, drawn from memory during the 2 months Marcus was held captive. Even in his final days, weak and sick, Marcus had been documenting his captor, leaving clues for whoever might eventually find his story. Sarah kept one of those sketches framed on her desk, a reminder that even in the darkest circumstances, people can find ways to fight back. To ensure that the truth eventually comes to light, the carnival never returned to Millbrook. The town council voted unanimously to ban all traveling entertainment shows, unwilling to risk any connection to the tragedy that had defined their community for so long. In place of the carnival grounds, they built a memorial park dedicated to all of Brennan's victims. At the center of the park stands a statue of Marcus Delacroix, captured in bronze at age 16, holding a movie camera, a tribute to the dreams that were stolen from him. The inscription reads, "In memory of those whose stories were cut short, and in honor of those who refused to let their voices be silenced." Every October, on the anniversary of Marcus's disappearance, the town holds a remembrance ceremony. Families gather to share stories, to support each other, and to ensure that the victims are never forgotten. Sarah still drives by the memorial park sometimes, especially on difficult days when the weight of her job feels overwhelming. She thinks about Marcus, alone in that underground chamber, writing in his journal by candlelight, never giving up hope that someone would find him. In the end, someone did find him. It just took 18 years and cost more than anyone should have had to pay. But Marcus Delacroix's story was finally told, his voice finally heard. And sometimes that has to be enough.